Like, healthy eating, again, the title of today's episode is Capitalism is Inside of Your Body. If you drink a Coca-Cola in the United States of America, capitalism is literally, it's like, you know how America has a military base in every fucking country in the world? That's capitalism with your body. These motherfuckers got a military base in your fucking heart valves, all right? And with that, I want to read this study here. So this is from sciencealert.com. A scary amount of nutrition science has deep ties to the food industry. Wow, shocker. You know, just like how a lot of the reviews and studies on cigarettes, oh yeah, cigarettes are healthy for you, it cleans your lungs. What? Who paid you to say that? Oh, the tobacco industry, right? So it's like, oh, a little bit of alcohol is good for you. What? Who paid you to say that? Oh, the alcohol industry, right. So, oh, a little bit of Coca-Cola is good for you. Well, who paid you to say that? The food industry. Let's read. The food industry has their fingers all over our nutrition research. According to a new analysis, 1 out of every 8 leading peer-reviewed studies on nutrition is tied to the business. Even worse, this conflict of interest, although acknowledged explicitly within the scientific journals, tends to produce results that favor business, and potentially with misleading consequences. The study found that the food industry is commonly involved in publishing research from leading nutrition journals, researchers write. Where the food industry is involved, research findings are nearly 6 times more likely to be favorable to their interests than when there is no food industry involvement. Science is a tool. Science is a framework, right? Again, similarly, let's look at, remember when there were a lot of these self-driving cars that were starting to be made, and like Google algorithms and stuff were being made for self-driving cars. And then self-driving cars kept running over black people because the AI that was written just did not like account for people with specific features. They were written by white people, and they were written for white people. And as a result, these self-driving cars, oh, whoops, just kept running over black people, right? So that's one of those situations. Science is a tool. It's a framework, right? If you do not go into science with knowing all of your biases and putting them on the table, then chances are your research is going to be flawed. So yeah. As far as the authors know, this is the first systemic review on the extent and nature of food industry's involvement in peer-reviewed research. Similar studies focusing on the industry involvement have produced mixed results, but far more research is needed. In recent years, and as industry ties to scientific research have begun to surface, many have lost their trust in nutrition science, and some have called it a credibility crisis. Again, the USDA guidelines recommend that the average American should get like 200 carbohydrates in their daily diet. Does it distinguish between fiber and simple carbs? No. You just need 250 carbs in a day. That's what the USDA food guidelines are telling you. Yeah, get 250 carbohydrates, simple carbs in a day. Oh, I drank a can of soda, so I got 30% of my daily value carbohydrates. That's like, when you read the DV, daily value, on the nutrition label, ignore it. Fuck that shit. It's dumb. Get your own info. Oh, yeah, this can of Coca-Cola is nutritious. It's giving me 30% of my carbohydrates for the day. What? Huh? I don't get it. In recent years, as industry ties to scientific research have begun to surface, many have lost trust, blah, blah, blah. Already read that. Whether or not the distrust is justified is something independent scientists and businesses have been trying to prove ever since. These new findings support growing evidence and rising concerns that competing interests are contaminating the field of nutrition and dietetics? Dietetics? I almost said dialectics, but there's no L there. Dietics. I don't know why my fucking camera is deciding to do this today. I'm so sorry. Where am I? Even at the most reputable journals, the findings also suggest that the involvement is skewing results, of course. Skimming articles from the top 10 nutrition journals in 2018, researchers in Australia found 13% of all the 1,461 papers selected for the study reported food industry involvement. right? Of all the different manufacturers, those involved in processed food had ties to the most scientific research, making up 40% of all business-involved studies. In some peer-reviewed publications like the Journal of Nutrition, business ties were found in 28% of all the articles assessed. In a journal called Nutrition Reviews, which is published by an institute founded and solely funded by food companies such as Mars, Nestle, Coca-Cola, and PepsiCo, business interests were declared in a quarter of all the papers analyzed. Now keep in mind, this analysis is only in self-identified ties to the food industry, where their biases are on the table. How many industries and how many studies do you think are being funded by the food industry that are being kept hush-hush? You have some declare their allegiance so that it's like, oh, we're being transparent. We tell you, right? And then, meanwhile, you've got this other huge fund going and privately funding these with dark money, right? And all that kind of stuff. Both of these journals have declared connections to the food industry, the authors of the analysis wrote. Several members of the board of the Journal of Nutrition have declared conflicts of interest involving food companies. The Journal of Nutrition is published by the American Society of Nutrition, ASN, which has formal partnerships with multiple food companies and has been criticized for supporting food industry objectives over public health interests. There are numerous reasons why a company might sponsor scientific research on its products. Sometimes they're legally required to do so. And of course, they're going to do so with the most favorable possible interpretation of those legal requirements. Assuming good intentions, food research led by a business is an attempt to generate new knowledge of a product that can be used to better inform consumers. But from a public health perspective, this also poses a problem. When business funds or sponsors scientific research, it is very possible that this mismanaged competing interests could influence what is researched or how it's researched, whether intentional or not. Even when peer-reviewed journals declare conflicts of interest, it's possible human bias is still tainting how the results are analyzed or sold to the public. Nutrition is completely or incredibly complex and difficult to study. It's not as easy as just finding out if something is good or bad for you, despite the many headlines that would have you believe otherwise. Again, gray areas. As such, some scientists argue transparency on the behalf of journals is not enough. We also need to actively reduce the industry's influence in the field, right? Whatever percentage the food industry has, right, in funding these scientific studies, whatever it is, should be zero. Absolutely. While it has previously been reported that nutrition research funded by the food industry typically respects scientific standards for conducting and reporting scientific research, the food industry was itself involved in that assessment, and the issue warrants further detailed exploration, the authors wrote. Sugary beverages are a good example of how company-led research can sweeten the sell, even when conflicts of interest are disclosed. Remember, Coca-Cola famously said, we're going to combat obesity. We're going to give you a 6-ounce or whatever can of Coke. But remember, a calorie is a calorie, right? Just remember, yeah, you can drink your Coke. You're only getting 100 calories, right? So drink your Coke, forgo the broccoli. It's the same thing. A calorie is a calorie, Coca-Cola said. But there are also instances when there are not. Coca-Cola, for instance, has been accused of controlling study data and results for research it funded. It ultimately had to say over a publication. The new research is limited in that it only looked at the studies that were upfront about the industry involvement and were published in peer-reviewed journals. Again, imagine how many of these studies are actually being secretly funded by these industries. Yet, even just by skimming top results in the field and taking disclosures at face value, researchers found business interests in the field are run-of-the-mill. Of all the articles involving businesses, over half produced results favorable to the food industry in peer-reviewed papers. That's probably not because companies are fudging the findings, right? Instead, businesses are probably pursuing topics and methodologies biased toward favorable outcomes. Editorial processes may also be subject to similar bias. Again, even in the ways summaries are written, like in a lot of these magazines, people will read the summary and then they'll not read the full study. So, right, the summary will be written by an editor who's going to write things in such a way that if you only read the summary, you come out with less of an idea as to what the total sum findings are of this scientific study. Nothing illustrates this better than the alternative. In the review, articles without food industry involvement produce positive findings a little less than 10% of the time. So isn't that interesting? But again, I want everyone to understand that the things that you put in your body, they're not like, you need to think of food as fuel. And think of it this way. You are drinking water. When you drink soda, you are drinking water that has poison in it for taste. When you breathe air, would you breathe in carbon monoxide if it tastes good? Oh, I'm just getting a little bit of carbon monoxide in my oxygen. It tastes good. Can you blame me? What? I don't get it. Right? And if you drink a soda every single day of your life, it's no longer a treat. Right? A soda a day is not a treat. It's not dessert. It's a part of your diet. And you need to look at the foods and the things that you're eating. And yes, I know, you have an addiction. I have an addiction, right? Every now and again, I go on a couple days worth of binging on eating, some fun foods, right? And, that's how I control my stuff. But I try to eat properly and healthily at least 6 days out of the 7 in a week, at least like 28 out of the 30 days in a month. That's what I try to do, right? And it's all about trying. It's about harm reduction. Think of it this way. If you already have a very bad American diet, right? If you forego a soda maybe once every other day, or cut your soda consumption from 2 cans a day to 1 can a day, you're still reducing the harm. Every little step counts. Here's another fun fact. Fructose, which is the main ingredient in high fructose corn syrup, ages your liver at 7 times the rate that glucose does. So basic, simple carbohydrates that you would find in something like pasta, for example, that hasn't been, of course, enriched with corn syrup. If you eat a plate of pasta, the glucose will age your body at 1 times what glucose does, because that's the control. If you drink a can of soda, right, those calories are going to age your body at 7 times the accelerated rate. Fructose will be staying in your liver for longer, which leads to fatty liver disease and which leads to metabolic unhealth. Again, these all things are linked, right? Food insecurity. When people have food insecurity, they're less able to make those healthy eating options, right? The harm that they're able to diminish and they're able to minimize is less likely to occur. They are more likely to eat more unhealthy foods. And that's the thing here. It's about harm reduction, first and foremost. And again, pay attention to what you put in your body, folks. It's a big deal.